Hello, and welcome to another Digital Photo Mentor live stream. I'm Darlene, and it is a Saturday afternoon where I am. And let me know where you are coming from. I am in Edmonton, Alberta, and my associate slash husband is in his man cave in the basement. And we are coming to you from Alberta, snowy but sunny Alberta today. So we're going to be doing a theme of editing particular styles of images over the next few weeks. Today we're going to be doing night photography. If you would like to participate next week, we are still looking for some people images. So they don't have to be formal portraits, but we want people photos to edit. So the bigger the faces, the better. So close-up picture you took at your friend at a party of your friend, family picture, snapshot, anything, just some people photos. So please use this link to submit your people photos. If we don't get enough, I'll be using my own photos to demonstrate people editing or portrait editing next week. Probably a combination of Lightroom and Luminar, which is what we do every week. This week, we are doing night photos, and I have some great pictures to share with you all this week. We've got some fantastic night pictures submitted, so I'm going to work through these in Lightroom or Luminar, depending on which program the person that submitted them uses. So let me switch over there and we'll get started. I'll take a sip of my coffee. All right, let's see who is here today. We got lots of regulars. Danelle, Deb, we've got some of your images. In fact, this is your image on the screen, I believe. So this is a fantastic image, Deb. You've got some great shots. Morning for Trish. I've got some of yours as well. Zay from Michigan. I've got your images, Karen. And nice to see you, Holly. Please do get me some portraits, Holly. That would be great. I know that you have some really nice people photos. Sheila from Down East. Good to see you. Marguerite. Bill, welcome. Is this your first time joining us, Bill? I think you've joined us before. Let's see. Bummerville, California. That's funny. All right. Let's get started. This image here from Deb is, oops, sorry, let me get that comment off of there. Rob is Google mapping, apparently. So this one here, I'm going to edit in Lightroom because that is her preference. So let's get started on this one. So heading into Lightroom, the first thing that I always do, I'm just going to turn off my thumbnails here at the bottom. I'm just closing these panels because then I've got sort of more real estate to work with. And I'll close this one so we can see the image bigger. If you're using Lightroom, you can do that just by clicking these little triangles. If you want all the panels gone, just do Shift Tab and they all go away and then they all come back. Okay, so I just want, actually, I'll do them all go away. I just want this one. Okay, so the first thing that I do is change the color profile. And you've seen me do this before if you've watched before. So let's take a look at what comes up for camera matching. Okay, landscape. Looks like it adds a lot of contrast. In this case, it's punching up the sky, but we can do that manually with a little bit more control. Okay, so I'm not going to use that one. Flat gives us more detail in the mountains, which I don't necessarily want. I'm not finding that any of these is particularly better. Maybe neutral, if anything. Okay, we could also take a look at, I find that the ones down here under the modern section, there's quite good ones in here as well. So we could take a look at these. Look at the sky and how the colors are coming out. And you can also see how much different shift of hue we can do. We definitely don't want that one, right? Just by changing some of these things. So I think we're just going to go with the neutral one, the camera neutral. Okay, so we'll start with that. I usually add a bit of clarity to every image, so not too much because we can add specific clarity to just parts of the image. Okay, so plus 12 here. Okay. Next thing I want to do is check the white point. So I can do shift, double click on the word. So hover your mouse over the word whites, hold down the shift key, double click. Now in this case, it's done a minus, which I don't want. I'm actually going to push it up higher. Okay, so I'm going to do it manually, holding the option or alt key down. And it's telling me when I do that, what's clipping. So this area of the tent is clipping, but I'm not going to worry about that so much because I want to get more of the stars. Okay, so I'm actually going to push this up a little higher because look what happens to the sky. And then I'm just going to bring the highlights down, and we can adjust the tent separately because look what that's doing to the sky. Okay, so we're brightening the sky, more of the stars are coming out, and I can do that also with a mask on the sky to bring more of the stars out as well. Right. Next, let's do black. So shift, double click, and it went down a little bit. I'm going to give it a little bit more black. I'm not too concerned about keeping detail in here. So when you have a shot like this, if you want more detail, you almost have to do like an HDR, but with Aurora, you have to do a fairly singular exposure. Now she's done a 6-second exposure and ISO 1600. Just a suggestion, Deb, I might do a faster, play around with the shutter speed. I don't know if you took a lot of this one, but when I was doing my Aurora skies, I did all kinds of different exposures. And I find that if you do a longer exposure, you capture more of the lights, but it starts to look just like a more blurry and blobby. If you want that dancing effect of the Aurora, try somewhere between 2 and 5 seconds. Okay, so in that case, you want to do maybe ISO 3200, just increase the ISO a little bit because your exposure was bang on this one. So just try a little bit shorter exposure time. And to be honest, this one you could actually make into an Aurora Sky replacement as well. If you're using Luminar Neo at all, or if you're using Photoshop to do sky replacements, you could use this one just by simply cropping and saving that as a new image. Then you can use that as a sky replacement in some other images. So do a double edit on this one. Edit once for the image itself, and then edit again for just the sky. Make a virtual copy, right? We could do that as well if you want. While I'm in here, I might as well do a crop. The tent is fairly well over in this third here, right? And I don't want to lose any of the sky. I'm going to go sort of off aspect ratio, and I'm just going to tuck in a little bit like that, like so. That looks pretty good. Just to put the tent a little bit more off center. There's something over here that's picking up light. You know what it is? It's on my screen. It's a cat hair. So I'm going to fix it. I keep seeing something white down in this bottom corner, but it's a cat hair on my monitor. So there's a message to you all. Clean your monitors. All right. So next, I'm going to deal with this tent because I want to bring this light down a little bit. So we're going to do a mask. And I'm going to choose subject and just see what it thinks is the subject. Okay, so I had my fingers crossed that it would pick the tent, and it did. Okay, so you can see the mask, the red mask is over the tent now. So I'm just going to bring the highlights down, and I'm going to turn the clipping warnings on with the J keyboard shortcut. So as usual, Rob, if you could please share a link to our Lightroom keyboard shortcut cheat sheet. If you'd like to have a printable one-page Lightroom keyboard shortcuts, just use the link to get that. I've kind of consolidated because if you go to Adobe and get their version of the keyboard shortcuts, it's pages and pages long. So I've just kind of put it together a one-sheet one of the ones that I use the most common ones, right? So J is one that I use a lot to see the clippings. Okay, so you can see that just by bringing the highlights down, it brings that tent back in line. Okay, I might even do whites down a little bit. It's very, very subtle. Okay, so that's the tent. While I'm in here, well, I'm going to rename it so I know that that is tent. Let's do one on the sky. So select sky. If you are, excuse me, if you are using an older version of Lightroom and you don't have these masking tools, If you're using, if you haven't updated to version 12, you'll notice that my catalog says version 12 because I updated it to the most recent one a couple months ago. Make sure you update. If you're paying monthly to Adobe, make sure you update because this is a big one to have these masks. It's really, really great, right? So you can choose when you create a mask, you can select the background now and select people. So it's really, really cool, right? Maybe share a video on that, Rob, as well. Share a link to the video I did on the Lightroom update 12 so people can check that out. Okay, so I'm going to call this sky. And what am I going to do to the sky? Okay, so you have to kind of decide, well, how do I want to enhance this? I'm going to bring out clarity because look what happened to the aurora. Okay, see, it's more blobby versus more clarity. I could also try dehaze. So dehaze tends to add contrast and clarity at the same time. Right, so look at that. Look what that's doing. Right, so clarity seemed to almost lighten it though. Let's try a combination of both. So when I go dehaze, look what happens. I'm going to shift this a little bit more yellow because it feels like the aurora is a bit blue to me. So I'm going to shift it a little bit this way. There's some nice green, right? And we can check our highlights. See, we can actually see that some of the stars are clipping now. If I want to have more stars, I can increase the whites. Okay, or the highlights. The highlights make the lights brighter. Okay, so this is how you could bring out aurora or stars in your sky. Is increase the highlights. Look at the stars coming out. Okay, I'm not going to do that in this case because the aurora gets blown out. But if you had just stars, this would really enhance the stars. Okay, so I could bring the whites up a little bit and the highlights down. So look what this one is doing. Okay, so it's on a blobby. Now we've got a much more defined. See this here? This is what you're starting to get with the dancing. And the rest here, you got a little bit of dancing, but the exposure is a bit long. Okay, so that's looking really, really good. I'd like to brighten the mountains up a little bit so we can come back to the main settings and bring the shadows up a little bit. Okay, so see if I go quite far, I'm getting shadows down here as well. I'm picking up some details here, right? So I'm going to bring the shadows up a little bit, but let's just do another mask. Now, if I want to select all the dark areas, the word itself is indicating to me which mask I'm going to use because luminance is selecting something based on the brightness level. Okay, so luminance range allows me to select tone in terms of bright or dark. So I'm just going to select dark. Okay, now you see it's selected everything, including this bit up here in the sky. I can fix that in a minute. I can adjust this so I can get more blending or less blending. Okay, so something like this. And then from this mask, I'm just going to do subtract. Let me select this to subtract sky because I don't want that part of the sky selected. Okay, so now I've literally just got the dark parts here. And I'm going to increase the exposure a little bit. The whites. Okay, so see by bringing up the whites. And I might shift the what's being selected a little bit as well. Right. And if you do this, make sure to add back some black because if you go too far, right, with these ones here, you end up with sort of a flat looking mess, right? And there's no black. And so I would add some black back in and not quite so far. So that is looking pretty good. So see how we've just got a hint of detail in these mountains here? See if I zoom in, it's just a hint of detail there. Okay, it's getting pretty noisy in here because they were pretty dark. So we could actually add a little bit of noise reduction here. Okay, and that will help. See, that adds noise to the left, to the right, it removes it. So that looks pretty good as well. In regards to noise, when you have a high ISO image like this, you could check for noise, and there is quite a bit of noise. If I zoom in, you can see it. So Lightroom is not the best tool for removing noise. It doesn't do the best job. Let's just say that. So if you have something like Topaz Denoise, or you can run it through Luminar Noiseless extension, if you have the extensions, and they will do a better job of removing noise. Okay. There's a question here. Danelle said, when you bring up the shadows, you can see more of the sky reflection with the sky color in the water now. I love this. Yes, exactly. Right. So what I did bringing up the shadows, right? If I turn this one off, and I should just call it, I'm just going to call it deep shadows. That's the darkest areas. When I turn that off, right, you're right. You're seeing more of the color in the water now. And I'm still not happy with this luminance range. Okay, if you want to see the mask, right, just press O on your keyboard. So I'm going to just blend it a little bit differently. I don't want it to have so much of the water. So something like that. Let me see what that looks like. And you see, I was picking up too much of the middle here. There we go. Right? That looks better. Okay, so let's see before. It's an excellent picture. And here is the perfect testament for why we do photo editing. There's obviously you guys don't believe in that because you're here and you're watching a photo editing live stream. There are lots of people who believe that you should get it right in camera and you shouldn't need to do any photo editing, right? However, in situations like this, you can't do what I just did in the camera. You can't say, well, darken the sky and the tent and brighten the mountains. You can't do that. And you also you can do an HDR in camera, but as soon as you bracket and merge them together, your aurora will be moving from image to image, and it's just going to be a blob. So situations like this, you really can't do it in the camera, okay? I might just give it overall, even just a touch of exposure. Oh, look at that. Look what happens there. I'm just going to check the blacks again. Look at that. Just a touch of exposure now, like 0.25, and it brightens up everything. So you see the mountains and everything. Let's do that. That looks good. So that's pretty much all I would do. I do have some presets in my Lightroom preset pack for noise reduction. And if we go down to detail, so if you want to just do some really basic noise reduction and sharpening here, right? All of the presets that I have here do is change these settings. Okay. So watch as I click them. See the sliders moving over here, right? So I'm just going to go with luminance low, luminance reduction low, and I'm going to go with portrait sharpening. Right? The reason that I use portrait sharpening is because the masking is up higher. Right? Notice this masking slider. When I hold down the Alt Option key, it shows me what part of the image is being sharpened. And in this case, it's the outline of the mountains, the tent, and the stars. Okay, so that's what I want sharpened, not the whole thing. So that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. Now, if you want to play with color even more, we can go into HSL and we can shift the aurora a little bit more. We could, saturate it more by choosing the eyedropper and say, okay, let's do some more saturation on here, right? A little bit. But I find that it's still a little bit blue. So if I just click on the color, we can shift this color. See that? So I'm going up and down. The further left it goes, I'm going down on my mouse. I'm holding this, okay? So down, the sliders are going to the left. Watch the green and the aqua slider, and up they're going to the right, okay? So I want to go a little bit to the left because for me, aurora should be more green, not blue. Let's do about like that. And then I want to lower the illuminance of just this part in the middle here, just a little bit. It's affecting the whole thing. Okay, so that is a challenge that I have with Lightroom's HSL tool. And that's one of the reasons why I use Luminar to do night photos. And you'll see a video that I just did literally this week. If you want to share that one, please, Rob. I did the 2 tools in Luminar Neo that I will show you on the next photo that I'm going to do, because we're going to do that one in Neo, and I could pull this one through there as well. Okay. So if you have Neo, Deb, you could pull this one through there and see what it looks like. Is anybody curious for me to pull this through here? Danelle says, I tested the no processing required, just used camera images submitted. 3 photos from Yellowstone and Jackson Hole in my club. All images got 7s, bad scores. See? And the thing is, you know, people, the purists will say you got to get it right in camera. But if you do your processing well and properly, nobody will know you processed. That is the key, right? Does this image look processed to you? No, right? Like, tell me in the chat, does this image on the screen now look like it's been processed? Tell me. Yes, no. Deb says she uses Lightroom and Neo. Okay, perfect. So let's pull this one into Neo real quick then, because we can do a little color harmony. So Lee says no. Sheila says no. Yeah, so everybody's saying no. So the key is that if your editing is obvious, you've given it away, right? So the key to your editing is to enhance, right? Don't make the editing stand out. Make the picture stand out, right? You've never seen an aurora, Trish. Oh, well, you know what? Come up to Canada. I'm gonna do a little ad here because, well, off topic here. I'm gonna just do a quick little ad because Trish has made me think of this, because I know that you've gone on a tour with Daniel, and I am leading Daniel's Cuba tour in February. So who wants to come to Cuba with me? So literally, I'm going to share a link to this, Rob, because I've already got it on my screen here. Right? This, anybody can come, including Americans. We have it fully legalized for Americans to come. You can fly it out of Miami, so connecting to Miami. Nigel, this is a short flight for you. Come to Cuba, and we're doing a Cuba tour. There's still spots available. I've got 6 spots left on this. I'm trying to scroll on the wrong window. So check that out. If you'd like to come to Cuba with me, we are definitely going to be doing some night photography in Trinidad. Last time we had some old classic cars and we light painted them. Very, very cool. So there's my little commercial for that. All right, let me get back over here. So let's pop this into Luminar. So I'm just going to do edit in Neo. I'm going to take it over as a TIFF, and we're going to open up Neo. So Danelle says, it looks natural. What is expected from professional photos? Exactly. Yep. Okay, now my Luminar has opened on my other screen. Let me just get that over here. Okay, so I actually created a preset. Now, I don't know if this one is going to work on this image, but from the video that I did the other day, I made a night preset. Okay, so I called it Night Skyline. So I'm just going to apply it, and let's see what happens. Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so the 2 tools that I applied were color and color harmony. Okay, so let's see what this one is doing. I may need to do some adjustments. So it's brightening the aurora a little too much. So I'm just going to actually reset this because it's gone too blue as well. I'm just going to reset this tool. So I think it will do a good job. We just need to set the right thing. So color harmony with this color contrast slider, right? If I have my color set over top of yellow orange, it brightens and adds contrast to those colors and darkens the opposite, which is blue. Okay, if I put it over the green, see how the sky is shifting, and now we've got the opposite where the blues are being brought out and the tint is dark. So I'm just going to sort of, you know, go through this. Ooh, look at what happens there. Look what happens there. So it's darkening the blues I don't mind that at all. See what that's doing? It's just adding a little bit of added contrast to the sky. And if we don't want this applying to the tent, we can just mask this, okay? I can also shift the colors. So these are neat sliders, and these don't exist anywhere. This tool does not exist in Photoshop or Lightroom, okay? So that's why I love this tool. So your warm colors, like the tent, for example, I can make it warmer. So we can actually make the tent red or cooler. So if I want the tent to be a bit more neutral, I can actually dial it down this way. And now we've got like a white tent, okay? Or I can warm it up, make it more orange. Blues, I can make them more purple or more blue. Actually, when I go this way, that does a nice thing to the sky too. So let's see what that's doing. Like literally with these sliders, I just sort of dial them in and see what happens, right? We could do highlights. We could make the highlights more yellow. See, that's affecting the sky and the tent. Let's try midtones, actually. Yeah, just playing around. Let's do a little more green. That actually helps the sky stand out a bit more. Let's see that. Gives it a bit more contrast. See that? Then the color tool. So remember the challenge we just had with the HSL tool in Lightroom is you can mask it. Okay. So that's why I really like the HSL tool in Luminar over Lightroom. Okay. So remove color cast. I showed this one in the night video because what this slider does is it attempts to look for a color tint in your image and remove it. And if you drag it up, I find that it also adds darkness or contrast. So see what that's doing to the night photo? Look at how it's bringing out that aurora a bit more, okay? I can just reset these. I'm just gonna check and see what's happening down here. Looks like it's adding saturation to red, which I don't want. If anything, I want to lower the saturation of this tent a little bit and maybe even darken it. So that's under luminance, right? So darkening the oranges and the reds, which is what the tent is now. That looks pretty good. It's not really doing anything. See, it's orange. Definitely orange. Okay. Now it's got brightening the blues. Don't know if I want to brighten blue or darken blue. Cyan is definitely in the sky. That looks pretty good. So again, I'm kind of going visually, but it's adding that contrast. Maybe gone a little too far with the orange. It's adding that contrast that I was looking for. And if I don't want it to apply to certain places, because all the work that I did to lighten the mountains, it's sort of being overwritten here. So I'm going to use the erase brush and just erase it from these areas here that I lightened in Lightroom. Okay, so I want it to apply to the tent, and I'm only erasing at 39%. See that? Okay. So now you can see what it's doing. And that's why I like that color tool here in Luminar. Okay. I'm going to try one more while we're in here. And let's do my favorite, Mystical. I'm not sure how Mystical is actually going to look. Actually, yeah, that's kind of cool. So let's do that. You can also lift the shadows here or darken them. Okay. We could warm it up or cool it down. There's so many places in Luminar that you can shift the color. It's unbelievable. That's doing a nice job. Always check the before and after of the tool. And I'm looking at, the sky here. Okay. Let's lift the shadows back up again. That's doing a nice job. So let's see the overall before and after with Luminar. See how that's just adding that bit more contrast back. And if I want to, I could run it through the noiseless extension as well. So I'm just going to save this and take it back to Lightroom. All right, let's see. So to get to Cuba, you have to go to Miami, Nigel. That's interesting. You can't get from, you're in the Bahamas, right? You can't get from there to Havana. Interesting. And Air Canada, in their infinite wisdom from Canada, is not flying to Havana anymore at all. So I have to fly into Veradero and then get a car. Aurora is something you want to see one day. I've noticed from images that the aurora borealis in the northern sky is different colors than aurora australis. I believe so as well, Trish. Like we're far enough north that we get aurora here quite often, and typically in the winter, but you know, like it's been super cold recently, so I haven't really wanted to go out and photograph in -30. And yes, Trish, you can get to Cuba from Cancun or from Mexico City. So we actually have a couple joining us from Australia, and they're going through Mexico City. If you go through the States, if you are not American, you still need to get the American visa to enter Cuba. So if you're coming from another country like Australia or New Zealand, then I would suggest connecting through Mexico for sure. Yep. Barbados, right? Sorry, I knew it was an island with a B in the in the Caribbean. I do it. Okay, Bajan. I will remember. You are Bajan. I like the lit tent, but it constantly brings my eye from the aurora back down to the bright orange tent. So we could darken that even more. I like the idea of the balance though, because it's kind of the opposite colors. And Rob is being funny and saying that Nigel could just swim. So I don't know how good a swimmer you are, Nigel. Approximately would the aurora last? No rhyme or reason, Sheila. It has to do with the sun and sun flares and so on. Rob knows more about that, but there's things like that predict it, like a KP index. So I have apps that predict when the aurora might happen. And sometimes I go out and I sit for 2 hours and I get nothing, right? So it's hit or miss. I mean, you could come to Canada while you are in Canada. You could come to northern Canada and, you know, for a week and not see them. But certain times of year you have a better opportunity, generally like late fall to early spring. It's rare that you get them in the summer, but we have, right? All right, let's move on to the next image. And I realize I got to fix something in my Luminar here because I can't show it to you and I skimmed over it quickly. So just know that there's something coming, but I can't show it to you today. Okay, so we've got Nigel's image actually, so let's work on that. So this image is the one that actually inspired me to do a theme on night photography, Nigel. So thanks for submitting that. You can't swim with his camera gear, Rob. Yeah, good point. Well, you could get a Pelican case and drag it behind you, but a lot of work. There. So discuss the aurora in the chat. Okay, so let's talk about this one. So first thing we always want to do again is develop raw. If we've got camera profiles for this camera, they will be here under camera profile. So just like I did in Lightroom, okay, they are here. We don't get to see a preview. So I'm going to have to pick each one and I'm just going to click on them quickly to see if any of these give me more detail. Okay, we definitely don't want monochrome. Okay, landscape definitely is bluer. So I'm going to go with camera neutral. And the thing with this image is it's a little bit underexposed, so it needs a little bit more exposure. The thing with night photos is it's really tricky to get the right exposure, especially when you have lights like this, because it's going to tell you that the lights are overexposed and everything else is underexposed. So it's really tricky. So night photography is actually done best before night happens. If you could share an article, please, Rob, on blue hour photography. So if you photograph right after sunset instead of later in the night, right? Again, that aurora is different matter because you might get aurora at midnight or 2 a.m. And we've actually gone out shooting auroras at 2 a.m. But if you want a shot like this with a city and you want the sky to not be black, go out at blue hour. So just after sunset. Okay. If you are looking for sunset times, there's a good website, for example. I think it's this one that gives the blue hour times. No, not this one. There's one that gives a good blue hour time. Sunset, moonrise. No, this one either. Oh, there we go. Okay, so for today, okay, so timeanddate.com, like this is for my location, but put in your location, okay? I'll put this in the chat. So timeanddate.com gives you the astronomical twilight, nautical twilight, and civil twilight. So civil twilight is right after the sun goes down. Okay. So if we look at, for example, for today, right, this is in our area, sunset is at 4:15 p.m. Yes, 4:15. Okay. And civil twilight starts right after that. Okay. So till 5 p.m., that's when you're going to get that blue hour. Okay. So use this site to find your blue hour times. Okay. So next thing I want to do is I want to brighten it up a little bit. Okay. And I could do that a few different ways. I can bring up the exposure. I don't want to bring the whites up necessarily because the lights are already clipping. So I want to bring up exposure, shadows. But you'll notice that even though if I bring the exposure up, enough to have light on the buildings, there's still no detail and there's no color in the sky. Okay. So there's just nothing there because it's photographed later in the night and you will never get detail out of that sky. Okay. So the only way to get color out of that sky is to shoot earlier. Okay. So I'm going to bring the highlights down a little bit. I'm trying to get some detail in the buildings and road, right? So that looks, there's the before and after. I want to make sure that I keep some nice black. Okay, so now I've got no black clipping, so I want to put the blacks back. I'm using the black slider, something like that, right? The next thing that I notice is that it's tilting a little bit this way, right? So I'm going to use the crop tool, closing develop. Before I close develop, I'm just going to always check off defringe and chromatic aberration reduction. Okay, I always correct those. And I'm going to do a tiny bit of noise reduction in here, okay? Because if we zoom in, we could see that there is quite a bit of noise. Okay? So I'm going to do a little bit of noise reduction here, okay? And just a little bit of sharpening here. So keep in mind that the sharpening and noise reduction is a dance. The more you increase sharpening, the more noise you'll get. The more you increase noise reduction, the blurrier the image gets. So you have to sort of find a balance between the two that's right for your image. Color, we could adjust the color on this one. I could give it more blue, right? But I want to get rid of some of this pink. So there's lots of magenta happening here. And what I'm looking at is, I'm just going to go back to as shot. I'm looking at the building. And if I think this building is white, I could use the eyedropper. And it doesn't want to work right now. Okay, this eyedropper currently is not working. I know that that's a bug that Luminar knows about, so they will fix that. So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. Because the lights here are green, right? So let's let them be green. Because right now they're sort of neutral. So as I dial the magenta down, you'll see the green show up here. So now we have a little bit more color. Like so. Okay, that looks a little bit more neutral. Okay. Now I'm going to close this and use the crop tool. And I'm just going to hit this button here for horizon alignment. So it's going to try and straighten that a little bit. That's better. I'm looking at the edge of the building here. So I'm just going to grab it and do it visually. Take it a little bit farther. That looks good. And I'm going to do composition AI to see if it suggests cropping in. Right? Again, it always crops in a lot. Now, there's all this stuff over here that's really not adding to the image. It's actually really bright, and your stuff that's interesting is over here, right? So I am going to take Luminar's suggestion and crop that part out. We don't need all of this black sky that's got nothing in it. So let's do something like that. Okay. I might go off aspect ratio and include a bit more on this side. So it's a little bit more panoramic, right? I still feel like it's crooked. Let's try one other thing. The other place that you can correct this kind of thing is actually in the develop tool. So I'm going to go back here and do transform. It's at the very bottom below optics. And this one will, if you press this button, it's going to try and correct any distortion on your buildings. Okay, so if I click that, see what happened? Now it's correcting the perspective distortion. And what I might want to do is go back and change the crop now. Okay, so I'm going to undo the crop. Let's try straighten again. Still looks crooked to me. I'm trying to look at the post and the edge of the building. Okay, and let's just come in. Something like that. Let's see if that looks straight. That still doesn't look straight to me. Does that look straight to you? It doesn't look straight to me. It's possible that this automatic correction didn't do a great job. So we could undo it, and we can actually do it manually as well. Okay, so if I want to just do a little correction, we can just dial it in. That looks better. Just very slight. Okay, so see, I'm seeing the edge here. And let's come in a little bit more again. And then it's just dance. Okay, so play around with correcting the distortion and the tilt on that one. Okay, let's try color harmony tool. Okay, there's not a lot of blue here, but let's see what we can do with what we've got. Okay, so I usually bring this up to about 30 on the mount slider, and then I play with the hue. Okay, so if I'm over magenta, okay, it's brightening this sign over here. Over green, it's darkening the sign, so that's actually cool. So darkening the sign, giving this a bit more color. That actually looks kind of cool. Look at the green coming out here. So that's a neat choice. And let's see about changing the colors this way. We could give the green a bit more yellow. Okay, so remember, warm colors, green is a warm color. Okay, it can go either way, depending on how much blue it's got in it. Now we can shift more blue or more magenta. Totally your choice. Okay. Look at that. See how the colors are coming out much more now? Okay. And then we could actually add a starburst on this one if we want. So using the sun rays, okay, all we got to do is bring it up, okay, and place the center. And I'm going to place it right on this lamp here. Okay, so this lamp doesn't even look like it's on, but we can adjust the warmth. You can make it bluer or warmer. Actually, blue is okay. And then we can adjust the number of rays. And my favorite, which is the randomizer. So I like to just do this kind of thing. Okay. Overall look allows you to go darker or lighter. So I'm actually going to go darker. Somewhere in there. And just play around with the sliders a little bit. Until I get something Might move this down here. Let's see. We could also put one here if we wanted to. So it just adds something a little bit different. Okay. You can also make it super subtle, okay, by turning down the amount. Keep the rays a little smaller, like so. Okay, so just adds a little something. Now we could try a sky replacement on this one. I'm not sure if it's going to pick up that there's a sky in here. We'll find out in a moment. Okay, it is giving me an option. Now, I've got a few night skies in my collection that I just made. So I'm going to try one of these. I'm going to try this one. Let's just see if it works. Okay, it's there. I'm going to brighten it up a little bit. And see how it's kind of doing a weird thing over here because it's picking up a lot of the noise in the background. So we'll just do a little bit of relight. Don't know if we're going to get a reflection or not because there's not really any water. So I'm going to turn that off. And let's just do a mask refinement because it could be that it's just not picking up over there. Right. Let's try it. Global. There we go. Got a little bit more of the clouds in there. It's pretty dark, right? So it's having a hard time replacing the sky because the sky is really dark. Let's try an aurora. Yeah, the problem is, like I said, the sky is super dark. So we could put an aurora in the sky, or we could put one of these starry skies in, but it's having trouble because of this dark part over here. Okay? So there's our starry sky. Yeah, see what it's having trouble doing over here? So that's the replacement. It's having trouble. But a neat idea, okay? So we could definitely try something like that. If the sky wasn't so dark, I think we would have better luck. Okay? There we go. All right, so before and after. All right, let's see. Photo pills. Yes, definitely. I use photo pills as well. If you're searching for the app, it's photo pills with 2 L's. Karen has put 1. I'm sure that's a typo. And it's good for a lot of things. Yes. So it'll tell you sunrise time, sunset time, the direction it's setting, and so on. Right. You could also do Sky AI. So you can hold up your phone to the sky and it'll tell you if you're going to see the Milky Way, for example. It'll tell you Milky Way is visible or not and what hours. Right? Yeah, I still feel like it's tilting as well, Danelle, but between playing with the cropping and the straightening, it still doesn't feel right to me, but yeah. Do they show a detailed grid to align the photo elements better? Not when you're doing the perspective. No, I wish there was. Yeah, I wish there was. Smart bit of editing, Nigel. Thanks so much. Well, this is your image, so now you can go and try it. See what you come up with. Let's go back to, I know this is Trisha's image. And this one, I forget whose this one is. That one is Derek's. Is Derek with us? I don't think so. Let's see. I wanted to ask you about this one, Deb. I may not have a chance to get to this one today, but I want to ask you about this one because I want to know how you created this little thing. Now, it looks like there's a stand and maybe something is spinning around it. Tell us about this one. Tell us about this one. I'm curious. Okay, so I want to do this. These are Luminar. These are Luminar. Let me do one of Karen's. Okay, so we had a similar problem here, Karen, as to Nigel's. So exactly what I just talked about with Nigel's is it's taken a little bit too dark in too late in the night. Okay, so you want to photograph earlier, and then you need a more exposure. So this is, again, it's a tricky one, and if you are like, let's take a look at your your settings. So 30th of a second at ISO 4000. So let me ask you this, Karen, did you use a tripod for this one? Because if you are using a tripod, and I'm going to get you to start sharing some night photo, there should be one for camera settings for night photos that one of our guests wrote. Rob, if you could please share that one, because he talks about settings for nighttime, especially in cities. And you want to use a low ISO, especially when you're using a tripod. So in this case, you could have used ISO 200 and then just let the exposure go as long as necessary to get the exposure. Okay, because what's happening when you go ISO 4000 is you're getting a lot of grain and noise. So noise is created by three things. Actually, four things. Number one is high ISO, which you have. Number two is it's created by long exposure. So we're kind of trading one for the other when we go with a longer exposure. But I find that you'll get less noise with a long exposure versus a high ISO, if that makes sense. The third thing is that noise lives in the blue channel, which you get a lot of at night because everything is blue, right? The fourth way you get noise is by pushing your exposure in post-processing, which is what we have to do here because it's a bit underexposed, right? Deb says, that was a few years ago. I was out with friends my first night. They had several setups. Okay, so it was something that they brought with them. It looks like a device that's spinning on some sort of axis or something. Okay, so let's take a look at what we can do with this one. Right? Again, we can choose camera matching and see if there's anything that I can pick here that will help. Okay, notice that when I chose flat, we get a little more detail in some of those dark areas. Right? So I might actually go with the flat one in this case to help it. Right? Then I'm going to use the Alt Option key and increase the white. So even though we have some clippings on the whites, it's the lights. Okay, so I'm not worried about it because I want to bring the whites up so I don't have to bring the exposure up as high. See, now when I bring the exposure up to about 1, we start to get some detail. Okay, I'm going to bring the shadows up as well. See, we're starting to see the scene a little bit better. And then I'm just going to add some blacks back in. Okay. So it's pretty dark, right? I could go more with the exposure, more with the whites, but we're starting to create sort of a really flat scenario. And no matter what I do, again, the same thing, not going to be any color in the sky. Okay. Rob is trying to be funny. Yes, we have a voice-controlled light spinner, and that is actually, his name is Rob. So it's called a VAL, a voice-activated light stand, which is a human being. And he says he already shared the link for that. Okay, perfect. So let's continue with this one. There's a couple of things I want to try with this one, actually, and one of these in Luminar, one of these that's dark, because I want to see what happens if I pull this through. If I zoom in here, can you see, like, we're at 100%. If I zoom into 200%, can you see the level of noise, right? And that's for those two reasons I mentioned. The high ISO combined with the fact that it's probably about 2 stops underexposed. So when you're doing night photography, okay, have you ever done HDR, Karen, right, where you take bracketed exposures? Night scenes like this are actually perfect for bracketing and doing HDR because it's a high dynamic range. So the lights are super bright and the rest of the part, the shadows are super dark. So it's a perfect candidate for HDR. So this one would have been a great one for HDR, right? I've done HDR with the lights in Las Vegas as well for the same reason, because the lights are super bright and everything else is super dark, right? So if this is a scene that's near you, or if you have something that's similar, just go out and practice night photography and do some bracketing. But remember to go out at blue hour, because then when you bracket, you'll get blue in your sky and not black, right? So I'm not sure how much more I can do to pull anything out of here because it's so dark. We can try shifting the color a little bit. So if I want to get rid of some of that yellow, right, in the lights, we could dial that down a little bit. And I'm just playing with the white balance here to get something that's kind of neutral. Okay, so see the difference? It's super dark, okay? That's about the best I can pull out of here. I would probably crop this a little bit as well, and keeping the aspect ratio. There's a whole lot of darkness down here and over here that really isn't adding to the scene. I want to keep this thing in the bottom, and again, there's a lot of dark sky that's not adding anything either. Okay, so I might even go off aspect ratio and crop it slightly more panoramic. Okay, so now we've gotten rid of all that dark space there that's not really adding anything. You've got this nice path leading you into the scene, which is really nice, and you've got some pretty lights. And what would have added to this picture as well is if you're doing your exposure and somebody walked down this strip here. If you're doing, a 1 second exposure, for example, you would have had a ghost coming down the way. So let me just do, I don't know why it does that. Let me just do the math on this for you. So if we talk about changing the shutter speed, okay, here, let me just do it with a calculator. Okay, so I'm just going to get my calculator app here. So I'm looking at the 1/30th. Okay, so if you're not good at math, and I'm curious what mode you shot this in. So this is a case where you do want to shoot in manual mode on your tripod. Okay, so if we change the ISO down one stop to 2000, okay, so that's half. We have to make the shutter speed half as slow. Okay, so then it goes to 1/15. Now, if we change the ISO to 1000, now we're going to get 1/8 of a second. Okay. Change the ISO to 500, we're going to get 1/4 of a second or 1/4 of a second. Okay. What did I say? 4,000. I forgot where it was at. 4,000. So 2,000, 1,000. Okay. 500. So then we change the ISO, let's say, to 200. Roughly, we're going to be at about a half a second. Half a second is no problem. Okay, so the exposure that I would have been using here is half a second at 2.8 at ISO 200-ish, okay, 250. Then that's not considered a long exposure by any stretch of the imagination. 30 seconds is a long exposure, okay? So definitely you'll get less noise by doing that, okay? And if you had a person going through the scene, you would get a ghost, okay? Well, we can find out what you used if we go over here. Yes, you used manual. Okay. So when you use manual, you need to pay attention to the histogram after you take the picture, because the original histogram, okay, if I go to the before, let me just do a reset here. Okay, look at this histogram. See, there's nothing, and then it's all bunched up over here. So even once we've edited, there's not much more, but you want to look for at least some detail creeping up on midtones. Okay, so you had nothing past sort of deep shadows. Okay, so if in doubt, when you're doing something like this, even if you don't do HDR, take a series of exposures at different brightness levels and then check them later when you're editing, because it's easier to pull the highlights back down if you have something that's too bright versus bringing the shadows up. Okay, you can pull the highlights down and still retain detail because they're clipping anyways, right? Versus pulling the shadows up and you get too much noise. Okay? Danelle says, when you're doing blue hour and exposure bracketing, how many exposures and what f-stop plus minus do you typically use? Okay, so first of all, if you could share the link to the HDR article that is when to use HDR, Rob, that one. And it talks about the camera settings there. So first of all, you want to know when to do bracketing. And I've already given an indication of this would be a scene to do HDR on. Okay, so when you have a scene that you want to do HDR, you only ever bracket the shutter speed. Do not change the ISO from exposure to exposure. Do not change the f-stop. Only change the shutter speed. Okay, if you change the aperture from shot to shot, your depth of field changes. And then when you merge the images together, you'll have a weird focus mess. Okay, so only ever change the shutter speed. And I use 2 stops apart. Okay, 2 stops apart. So Rob has just shared a link to that article, Danelle, so you could check that out. And I go through all of those settings there. And also, Rob, if you want to share a link to our HDR webinar, which is now a course that you can buy, that might be one that you want to look at as well, Danelle, if you want a walkthrough of how to shoot and how to process HDR. Okay, so now I'm going to move from this one. And I am going to do some minor noise reduction in here. So I'm going to go luminance number 2. And I'm still going to go portrait, because the only difference with my portrait presets in here is that the masking is higher. Right? So if I zoom in, yeah, see, Lightroom just does not do a great job of noise reduction. Right? See, that's better, but it's still not great. Right? So I would use Topaz or On One No Noise or Luminar Noiseless, right? But I am going to copy these settings. I'm going to choose everything except cropping, okay? And I might undo white balance too. Then I'm going to attempt to, actually, I'm going to go back here. I'm going to copy again. So I'm not going to copy the profile because I used a camera profile for this camera, which in this case, I don't know what camera this was because it's a DNG. It was a Nikon, right? Oh, I could have pasted it onto, actually, let's see what happens, right? I'm going to copy the treatment and profile. And I'm going to put it onto this image of Deb's just to see what happens. Because this is a Nikon file as well, let's see what happens if I paste it. Okay, so if I go up to the top here, it did choose the camera profile. See that? Okay, so it wouldn't have worked if she had been shooting a different kind of camera. But look what happens here. Okay, so the same things I did to that city image brightened up this as well. Okay. So I brightened the whites, increased the exposure, which is, remember, exposure is midtones, okay? Shadows and blacks. Okay? I would probably darken this part of the sky. And the best way to do that, now it's got a lot of orange in the sky. Does anybody know why the sky is orange? Okay. Hey, David. So does anybody know why the sky is orange? So I want to correct the sky, and I might even shift the color, but I want to darken this part of the sky because it's uneven. Okay, so I'm going to use a linear gradient, and I'm just going to drag it from there across, and I'm probably just going to try bring down the highlights. Yeah, that works. So I'm trying to even it out a little bit. You see that? I just want the sky over here to match the sky over here. Okay. But why is it orange? Anybody? No, it's not the setting sun. Danelle is on the right track. Okay. It is light refraction, and this is what's called light pollution. Okay. So this means that if you are near a city, that's the lights from the city just reflecting up into the sky. Especially you'll get that at night when you have cloudy skies like that. Okay. So that's why dark sky areas, to find dark sky areas is really hard nowadays because there's city lights somewhere nearby. Okay, so there's see if you can find the link. There's a dark sky website. See if you can find that, Rob. Just do a Google. There's a dark sky website. If I go over here, I can probably find it. So if you just Google dark sky Dark sky map. That's it. I'm pretty sure it's this. Dark sky map. Yeah, so there's a few different ones. So search for dark sky map, and you'll be able to find places that have more dark skies. Okay. So for example, if I zoom in here, right, the more red you have, right? Like look at the mountain areas here, right? These are darker skies. Okay. So in the deep mountains, you could find some dark sky, right? These are cities. Okay. So the further away you get from a city, so find your area and you can search for dark sky. Right. So if I want to correct that, right, I could do that a couple of different ways. We could try doing that in HSL. So I can either shift the orange. That kind of helps a little bit. Right. I can change the saturation of the orange. Yeah, that's better actually. I'm going to go back here. So just desaturating the orange. See, there's some red in there as well. There's some weird stuff happening here. Can you see that? Okay. So you want to be careful using these that you don't go too far. I think instead I'm just going to do a selection of color. So I'm going to do a color range and just choose this orange color. But I don't want the stuff down here as much. Let's just dial it back a little bit. And I can shift it towards blue. That helps. And maybe a little bit of magenta. Okay, so you can sort of dial it out. I could also go in here and choose a color. Okay, so if I want to add some blue, that helps too. Okay, somewhere in there. And then it goes more with the colors in this image. I might expand the color range a little bit. Let me do O. I want to get a bit more of the sky. There we go. So I'm just changing this refinement. So now it's picking up. See what it's doing? It's changing that color, but it's also affecting this. Okay, so if I don't want to affect this area, I could just do a subtraction and do a radial gradient and say, I don't want it to affect this area. Okay, so now we see that it's just shifting the sky and this bit over here. Okay. Cool image though. Cool image. All right, let's take a look. What else can we do here? Once you've done one image like this as well, now remember I copied this one, so I'm going to go over here and I'm going to paste on here. Okay, so same thing. I'm going to paste. Okay, so that's the setting that I did from this image. Okay, copied and pasted onto this one. And the same thing applies here, right? So you could definitely use a lower ISO. Now, if you use a lower ISO and a longer exposure, that water will change, okay? So this what might be a case where you experiment with higher ISO and a faster shutter speed like you did here, and then try a lower ISO and a longer shutter speed, and then you'll get the water actually blurring more. You'll get it sort of that soft, creamy look. That's really crooked. Let's just straighten it a little bit. And there's a whole lot of bottom stuff here that you don't need, right? I would have liked to see this as a horizontal as well, right? To see a bit more of what's over here, right? And this is a neat one that you could play with colors, right? So look at the colors we've got here, especially when stuff is lit up at night like this, right? So you could play with saturation, hue, and using this targeted tool, right? We can literally just put it over the color and I can make it blue, more purple, right? We could shift this color, right? If I want to neutralize this orange in the background, we can just desaturate, right? So now we've got predominantly the purple. Again, we can shift hues. I kind of like it blue, actually. Somewhere in the middle. Right, so you can decide, do you like purple? Do you like blue? Right, if you don't want to shift the hue, right, you can just give it a bit more saturation. Same thing. Maybe we want to lift the luminance of the dark blue. See, that brings out the tree a bit more right here. Bring out the luminance. And we could try, say, magenta. Now, keep in mind that if you lighten, right, color goes away. So if we lighten the purple, notice that the watercolor now is faded out. If we darken purple, see how color is more enhanced. And that has to do with, remember, we talk about more black you have in your image, the more color saturation. Okay. Danelle says blue. Yeah, so you get to decide, right? There's no right or wrong here, right? If you want more blue, make it more blue. Like so. Now we got a little bit of blue, a little bit of purple. So lights at night can be really fun to play with. So if you haven't done a lot of night photography, get out there and try some more. We also have a challenge which is going on. Rob, if you could please share that night creature challenge, right? So I think people are not entering the night creature challenge because they're concerned that they don't have a creature. Well, use this one, Trish. This is kind of a creature and it's a night photo. So honestly, enter any night photo in there into that challenge because we've got $100 prize to give away this month and we want to have some more entries. So please share that link to that challenge, please, Rob. Yes, I did. there isn't a special yet. The special is going to start on Friday. So you've heard it here since you guys are all here live. Our Christmas special will be starting on Friday the 16th, and we're going to have a bunch of our stuff on sale, including probably the new Sky package as well, which includes if you buy the Sky pack, you get both Sky packs. And if you already have the original one, you can just buy the new one. Okay? It does not have to be a live creature, Trish. It could just be anything. Nope. Doesn't have to be a live creature. I'm basically expanding it because we're not getting a lot of entries. So take any night photo and put it in there. Yep. And we've only got, I think, how many comments are on that one, Rob? I think there was only 3 entries. So even if you enter, you've got a 1 in 4 chance of winning $100 gift coupon to spend in our store. So you can buy anything on our store, including any of our courses. Okay. So $100 will get you a course, right? And if you wait to use it on the sale items, probably buy you a couple. All right. So I don't know what he's saying to me. Tell me in the chat, Rob. You're trying to tell me something from the basement, and I cannot hear what exactly you're saying. Must it be on the land or in the sky? Absolutely in the sky. Yeah, no rules. You make it up. There's nothing in the chat, Rob. It says just above where I shared the links. That's the last chat you have. Honestly, Sheila, you can edit or not edit. It's just about participating. So all you have to do to enter to win is to participate. Yep. Just share something. I have read the private chat, Rob. There is no new messages there. Oh, I asked if I'm going to be doing one on sports photos. Okay. I hadn't considered sports photos. I don't know if that's something that a lot of people do, but we are going to be doing an urban one. So by all means, send those in, Michael, and I could add that into urban if it doesn't fit into another category. Yep. The link to the competition is the one that he just shared above, Karen. It's the Night Creatures one. So that link right there. So just click on the link that Rob shared to go to this challenge. Okay. All right, let's see. I want to do another image in Luminar. So I'm going to hop back over to Luminar. There we go. Okay, so we did that one. I want to do this one because this one is basically exactly what I was telling you guys to do, is to shoot blue hour. Okay, can you see the difference with the sky here? And I don't know if I can see the settings in here, but I can if I go here. Okay, so let's take a look at his settings. 2 seconds, ISO 1600. So he still could have used a lower ISO, right? You could have used ISO 400 and definitely don't need F9 on a scene like this. Okay, so I would have used ISO 400 or even 200, a wider aperture, like maybe even 5.6 or F4. You don't need, there's not a lot of depth of field needed here. Everything is pretty much the same distance away. So I would have used a lower ISO, a bigger aperture, and then have the shutter speed fall where it may, because the lower ISO and the smaller aperture or the bigger aperture may balance each other out, and you may end up back at 2 seconds anyways, but you're going to have a lot less noise that way. Okay, because now you've got a long exposure and a high ISO. So let's go back, and this is a Nikon file. So let's go back to Luminar. And the first thing, again, I always want to do is develop RAW. Let's look at the camera profiles. Okay, if we choose camera vivid, see what happens? It adds contrast and color, and we've lost all the detail. Okay? Landscape looks pretty contrasty as well. Okay? Portrait actually brings out more of the blue. Standard, and the last one. Okay, now look at that. Neutral, again, flattens the image, but it just brought out more color. So I'm going to start with the flatter profile and go from there. Yes, blue hour is okay because I consider that a night photo, Trish. So absolutely. This is blue hour. This is a night photo. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so now I'm checking the histogram. Okay, so I see that there's not a lot over here. So the first thing I want to do is turn on my clipping warnings, and I see a little bit of the whites clipping here. But let's just take it a little bit farther, because if you have the light sources clipping, that's totally fine, right? That means there's no detail there, but it's a light source, okay? Like the sun or a street lamp. I'm not worried about that. Then I'm going to bring the exposure up a little bit. Okay, now see what's happening to the sky. We're getting more detail, getting more color, and I'm only bringing that up about 2/3 of a stop. Then I might bring the shadows up, but not very much. So look, can you see that on your screen? I'm starting to get detail down here. See that? Where it was totally black. Okay, I'm starting to get detail here and in this rock wall back there. Oops. See that? So I'm going to bring the highlights down a little bit. So I'm just keeping those clippings down. That looks good. Okay, now I'm going to play with the other options here. I'm going to add a tiny bit of sharpness. And again, I do a little bit of sharpness, and I'm going to add a little bit of luminosity here as well. And let's see, I'm going to do those two. Okay. And I'm not going to worry about transform here. I don't see any distortion. But I want to play with the color a little bit. It feels a little bit purple, so I'm going to go a little bit this way. See how the color shifts, right? Look at the purple versus if I go just a little bit this way, a little bit less purple, and we could add more orange or more blue. Right? But see the difference with this sky versus the skies that we saw and the ones that were shot later, okay? And I'm not pushing the exposure up as much here. I'm only pushing the exposure up 3/4 of a stop. So it's a tiny bit underexposed, but totally workable, okay? Totally workable. All right, so develop raw. The next thing I'm going to do is go directly to this color harmony tool. Okay, so again, this is the perfect one for night photos because it works on opposite colors, and blue and yellow or blue and orange are opposite on the color wheel. Okay, so when we increase this, if I put it on yellow, right, we're darkening the blues and brightening and adding contrast to yellow. If I put it over blue, look what happens to the sky. Crazy, right? Look at how we can darken those yellows and bring out that sky in one fell swoop and bring out the color. How amazing is that, right? And then if we want to neutralize these yellows a bit, we've got this slider. Okay, so we can make them more orange if we want to punch that contrast of the colors, or we can neutralize it. Okay, and again, we can make the sky more purple or more blue. And in this case, adding a little bit of purple actually just brings out some detail up here in the sky. So I'm going to leave a little bit more yellow. And then I'm just going to dial the saturation. In this case, the brilliance slider is saturation. Okay, down a little bit. And maybe not quite so much purple. Somewhere in there. So let's see what that's doing. Look at this tool. This is the Magic Night tool, right? I swear they created this for night photos. So it's great on anything that has super different contrast. I've used it on portraits as well. If I have a portrait of a person where their face is warm tone, right? Skin is a warm tone against a cool background like green or blue, same thing. We can bring their face out, darken the background, one slider. Okay, next I'm going to crop it because there's, again, a lot of negative space. And I know Rob shared the article earlier about visual mass, right? So visual mass is how much space does it feel like something takes up in the scene? So not necessarily how big it is, but how big does it feel, right? So when you look at this, let me just get myself off the screen here. When you look at this image, okay, there's a lot of dark all the way around here, and it takes up almost the bottom third of the image. So I'm going to see what Luminar thinks is a good crop. Okay, so look at that. It came in tighter. It cropped out this rock wall over here, which I'm not entirely sure I want to do yet. Okay, I want to keep some of the base here, but let's see if we move it over. Let's see what happens if we do something like this, okay, and keep the rock. I'm going to go off aspect ratio again and go free. I'm going to keep the top of the rock and keep it wider. And I'm just going to kind of look with my eyeballs to see if it looks straight. And that looks pretty good there. Okay. So now I've got something that really focuses your eye in. We have this in the reflections, not so much sky, but what is there is interesting. Okay. Let's try the sky addition on this one. Which feature do you mean? This color harmony tool? This is not a new one. This has actually been in Luminar AI. I think it's been in a few versions, but yes, I do cover this in my Luminar class to know. I go through every single tool, every single tool. Big time difference, pun intended. All right, so let me do sky on this one because I think the night sky or one of these night skies might look really cool on here. I'm going to choose this one. Aha! Look at that. How cool is that? Right? It's not blending quite as well down here as I would like it, but we can work with that. Okay, so I want to check the horizon position. See, it thinks the horizon is down here, but it's actually back there. So I need to set the horizon. I wish I could tilt it. Because I corrected the tilt on the original image, it's not tilting the sky, and I wish there was a tilt, but I want to line it up with the horizon. There we go. That's better. Okay, and this moves it back and forth this way. No, not so much. Maybe a little bit less clouds, something like that. Okay, and I'm going to do fixed details, something like that. Okay, so that looks actually pretty good, right? See that? I might darken the sky a little bit. Or try a different one. Okay, so this sky worked a lot better than the other one on the other image because of that darkness. Okay, see, that one's okay. We've got not quite a match over there. Yeah, see, now I see my sky's not down far enough. I need to adjust the sky, go down a little bit farther. And I've even got one that's got aurora in the corner. See that? So we could even have a little aurora in the corner. So I need to move that down a bit. There we go. Yeah, it's definitely, it's hard to find the edge of the, where's the edge of the world, right? Somewhere in there. If I bring it down and then blend it a little better. Right. That's kind of believable. Okay, that's kind of believable. Not bad, not bad. I'm just trying the different skies. That one's actually better. Actually, I like that one. I like that one. That blends better. See, I'm looking for, does it blend nicely? Does it match with the image? That looks better to me. We can make sure that it's got a reflection or some in the water. And then relight will add the blue down into the main image as well. Okay. And I see there's a question. Okay. If you do a sky replacement first, can you fix the tilt and will it display properly? That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. There used to be a rotate on when they had the sky replacement and Luminar AI. There used to be a rotate horizon, and they don't have that now. So I basically just moved it down far enough so that it was covering the area over here on the left, right? But currently there is not a way to do that. I haven't tested doing the sky before I do the crop, right? Because if we uncrop it, well, let's just try that. Okay, so if I uncrop it, oh no, I didn't really tilt. No, I didn't really tilt a lot, did I? So its crop shouldn't be affecting it that much. It just looks like it's having a hard time because the tones in the background are so similar, right? But I think that it's working pretty well. So there's our before and after. David, good question. I have tried with mine, and I actually find that it doesn't seem to recognize my profiles. Let me find something that I've got, one of my raw files that I would have taken with Fuji. Okay, this one of Japan. I'm not sure if this is a DNG, though. I might have converted these to DNG. Give me a second here. Yeah, that's a DNG. Let's see, which is an RAF file. Okay, the flowers. This is a Fuji file. Okay, so if I take this one in, oops, it does not show. It does actually. It does. So these ones are ones that I've added custom. But yeah, normally it does not pick up the XT3 profiles, and I'm not sure why. It just has Adobe standard. So you could find them online and add them as custom, which I've tried to do, but I find that they're really green, right? So yeah, I'm not having super amount of luck with the XT3 files either. So it's not just you, David. Okay, where did I go? Okay, so I think we're going to stop there for today. Let me get back into Lightroom because I've got my notes here. For those that were asking questions about courses, yes, we have. No, I don't want to delete that from my. Yes, we have a Luminar Neo course, and we also have a Lightroom course. So if you have not done our courses, then hang out with those. Make sure you are signed up to our email list. Okay. Let me know if maybe provide a link to somewhere where they can sign up for our email list, Rob. If you sign up for either of the keyboard shortcuts, you will be signed up for our email list as well. So make sure that you confirm that when it says to confirm. So make sure you stand up for or sign up for our email list so that you are on our list, so that when we publish our sale this coming week, that you will get notice, right? Hey, Stan, good to see you. Stan is another local photographer. There he is with his bunny. Stan is a volunteer with the local SPCA. I know I've seen him there. So again, reminder, if you want to submit your photos for next week, we are looking for people photos. Okay, so portraits. I know pet portraits are portraits, but I'm looking for people. So we want to see people's faces in the photos for next week. So please submit some portraits or some people photos that you have. Again, it doesn't have to be a formal portrait, doesn't have to be studio, doesn't have to be fancy, just somebody's face. That's what we're looking for. All right. There's a link. You can subscribe to our 10 challenges PDF. It's a nice little 10 challenge ebook that you can do, and you can sign up that way as well. So if you're not already on our email list, as in you get emails from me about once a week, if you're not getting those, make sure you sign up, and then you'll get notice of all kinds of things. You'll get notice of any articles that we publish on the website. I often tell you about sales of things, not just ours, but Luminar promotions and things like that. If you need to purchase Luminar, there's now a new code. So if you buy Luminar with our new code, which is DPM10, if you want to type that into the chat, please, Rob, that's good for 10% off. Okay, so the previous one was $10 off. This one is good for 10% off. So if you're buying Luminar with all the extensions and everything, 10% off is a pretty good savings. So there it is. Maybe a link to get it as well. So our digital photo mentor Luminar link, Rob, please. And that's about it. So any other last questions that I missed? Okay, I will. Where's John's comments? Oh, hey, John. I had one of your images. Let me see. Thanks for. I'm glad you enjoyed that. Now, which one was yours? Was this your image? It was your image. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm glad I did your image. I didn't know you were here, but I'm glad I did your image, and I'm glad you enjoyed that. So if you are using the Luminar, which you said you were, give that a go. If you want to pick up our Sky Pack, as we've indicated, as this, it's kind of a secret because not everybody attends these live. If you want to pick up our Sky Pack, it will be on sale with the other items on Friday. Vicky, if I came to Cuba from Edmonton, where would I fly through? So I'm connecting through Toronto and Veradero, and then we have a driver that can pick you up. It's an additional charge, but that's no problem. And I also work with a local travel agent, Vicky. So if you send me an email, I can answer any questions you have about the tour. The partner, Daniel, who's actually running the tour through his business, so I'm actually leading it for him now. He's actually in Bhutan leading a tour right now, so he can't answer any questions. He'll be back to Bangkok in the next couple of days, so he'll be back to the land of Wi-Fi. They didn't have any connection when they were in Bhutan, but if you were coming through Edmonton, I can help you and connect you up with my travel agent as well, and she can help you book flights, right? So yeah, I'd love that if you came along. That would be great. We have one other Canadian coming so far, and 2 Australians and 1 lady from Florida. And they've all traveled with us in the past. So far, the people that are coming, I already know. So be great to have some of you come with me so I can actually see you face to face. That would be so much fun. See, Trish knows where Dan is. He's back in Bangkok tomorrow. Yes, he is. That's what he told me. I was messaging with him last night on WhatsApp. So, and Daniel used to work for us. And like I said, we've now switched roles. Daniel was our tour leader and when we were doing tours, and now I'm leading a tour for him. So he's organizing it and putting it on. And we're going to do a workshop at the end, which is 3 or 4 days in Havana. And the workshop will be more actually like portraits. We'll have ballerinas. We'll do a sax player on the Millicon, that kind of thing. And Daniel will be coming for that. So if you join us, Trish, Daniel will be there for the extension. So the workshop at the end. All right. I think that's everything. Let me get back to Lightroom one more time because I had my link to submit photos, and we will end there. Send us your people photos, please. Send us your. See, look, I've even got my Cuba shirt on today, and I didn't even think about that. So come to Cuba. I'd love to see you guys in February. And until next time, we'll see you next week on the 17th for portrait editing. are we going to do a full Christmas Eve one? I think we may just do a quick live on Christmas Eve, which is the 24th, just to say hi. We can all pop in and say hello, and we'll see you then, and we'll say Merry Christmas then. So I'll see you next week for People Photos. Take care.